gaan of niet? We zijn al live. Nee, je bent nog... Maar je kunt mij niet zien, hè?
So I see whether I need this or not. Unless we have some seats here at the front here. Irina, so we have a seat here at the front for you. We are almost ready to start, but since we have to coordinate it online, I'll wait till the signal comes from the back that we can really start. Okay, welcome here everyone. My name is Wim van Saarloos. I'm the president of EASAC, and I would like to welcome you here at this meeting, the launch of the Meat Alternatives Report. I'm not a member of the Belgian Academies, but I would also like to welcome you on behalf of the Belgian Academies. We're always very happy if we can use their facility here, the Academy building, to launch our work, especially since it's so close to the European institutions. And indeed, I'm very happy to welcome many people here who walked over from within Brussels, from the European Commission. We have a member of parliament who was able to come. We have people from the SAM Secretariat, the Science Advice Mechanism here in Brussels, with whom we cooperate. And so that's a great advantage to have the launch here. In addition, I would like to welcome the working group members, the representatives of NGOs, of the media, and of course all the people who join us online. Very welcome here for this launch. EASAC is the organization. It stands for European Academies Science Advisory Council. It is an organization, a network organization of European academies, one per EU country, plus the academies from Norway, Switzerland, and UK, who join together to give independent science advice to Europe. With independent, we stress that it's the scientists, the expert scientists, that do their work free of charge. It's bottom up. We choose our topics bottom up, and we then bring people together to give advice like we do today here on meat alternatives to Europe. That means that you can, basically, we represent the best advice that our experts in Europe can give, and that we hope contributes to the policies in Europe, because we focus on science-based policy advice in Europe. Now, EASAC is organized in 3 program lines. We have biosciences and public health, under whose auspices today's report is being released. We have a program line on energy and one on environment. Increasingly, we see that these issues touch, of course, on the climate challenges, and we see that many of our reports these days are on topics that are relevant for the climate issues and the challenges we face there. The way we work is that for each of these program lines, we have a steering panel of, again, representatives from scientists from Europe. They are nominated by our member academies. They meet about twice a year to discuss what the issues are, what the topics are that will be on the agenda in Europe and where science advice could be important. And again, sort of, even though we have the 3 program lines, as I said, we focus more and more on climate issues. Now, indeed, the footprint of eating meat, of raising cattle, is so large these days, the CO2 footprint of that. And of course, a lot of the discussion these days is about, shouldn't we eat less meat, and aren't there alternatives? And that brings us to the issue here today. We're very happy to launch the report on meat alternatives that at least allows us to discuss what are the alternatives to meat if you want to have a healthy diet and if you would like to reduce the meat consumption. I would like to hand over to Bert Riemer, who is the chair of the working group that led the study and under whose auspices the report was written. And then Bert will also tell you how the program will take place. Bert.
Yeah, so if I can show you the program. Let's see, we go. Here's the program. So what we are planning to do is to have it in two sessions. The first session will really be focusing on the products themselves. The second one on the more societal aspects of the attempts that we are trying to introduce to the public to eat less meat. So we started this project in 2021, a long time ago, but we had some delays. We had hoped to discuss, to publish this in about 2023, but because of delays relating to illness of some of the program directors, it took us a long time to do this. So I chaired the working group. I also co-chair the Biosciences and Public Health panel with André Knotheers, who is also in the room here. So it has been a long term in the making, and I think it is an important, it's important and also an extensive report. So that leads me to say that what you see here on your sheet is only the executive summary, but we managed to write 69 pages on various aspects of meat alternatives. So, and then further on, if you look at the QR codes that have been that are around the room, you will see that they are allowing you access to the full report at this stage. So it's a report on meat alternatives, as Wim said. Rosa Castro will be giving our first presentation on the content of the report and the types of topics that we are covering in it. Then we have a panel discussion. The first panel focusing on the product, largely on the products and some aspects thereof. Then we have a second presentation online from Hanna Tuomisto, who was a very prominent and a large collaborator and a person who put a lot of input in the actual report. She is speaking from a conference in Sofia, so we hope that that all goes quite well. And then we have a second panel discussion again with a number of people that we have invited. And then we have some coffee and networking afterwards. So I think it's a great pleasure to me to introduce the report. It's one of these things where you ask yourself, so what is the problem? We have a situation here which is a win-win-win situation for everyone. If we can reduce meat consumption in Europe, it will have health benefits, it will have benefits for the environment, and it also will create a greater level of food security potential in Europe. And so, in a sense, in that with those words, I'll say I'll recommend the research and the report wholeheartedly to you. And it is a long read. People have complained a bit and said there's a bit of repetition in it, but what we did, we decided that we left it in for the very simple reason that I suspect that a lot of people will read only sections relating to some topics that they are interested in rather than the whole report. So that explains some of the duplication that you see in the report. So with that, I'll introduce Rosa. Rosa was the program director of the Biosciences and Public Health steering panel in the EASAC. She's gone on to other fields, but nevertheless, she did a very good job in writing the report, and so she is the main person who will be presenting the content of the report. So Rosa, you want to come?
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. And thanks to EASAC actually for inviting me today, because this was, of course, a collective work. I promised to be brief, so I will, but I have to thank you, really, all of you, and very especially, of course, to Bert and Andre, who were like my guidance during my time at EASAC, also to Wim, and also the whole EASAC team, who made it possible to draft this, because there were many difficulties, and I will scratch the surface, but I invite you all to read the report and to ask questions. And if we don't have the answers right now, because some of them are very technical and I'm not able to answer every specific detailed question, because I was a facilitator, by the way. We have an expert group, as Bert explained to you, and Wim, and they are the ones that brought their expertise that you see reflected. And you will see also diversity of views, because we had diversity from countries, views, preferences in food, and levels, and different expertises. So you will see that reflected in the conclusions and recommendations. So just very quickly to give you an appetizer to the report. Actually, the report, maybe I should start by saying that the aim was to look at the impacts of different meat alternatives. And one thing that we actually had lengthy discussions was about the scope of the report. That's, I mean, if I don't finish all the slides, it's okay, don't worry. But I think I should give you this explanation because we had a lot of time discussing, are we talking about alternative proteins or meat alternatives? The group decided to focus on the products for many reasons that we can discuss later on. But we defined the meat alternatives as products that try to mimic the features of meat. And it's because I think one real reason is that consumers need to know more about these products. We see them and we don't really know sometimes what is inside them and how we can compare them. So that leads me to the second objective, which was to look at these meat alternative products, and we had to define the scope because otherwise we will be still working on that report. So we defined meat as it is defined in EU regulations, so that excludes, for instance, fish. And we look at these categories: plant-based products, products of biomass fermentation, products of precision fermentation, cultivated meat, and insects as proteins. And in that, I can tell you maybe that there were challenges, opportunities, of course, of using the meat alternatives. Generally speaking, as for the environmental impacts, most of these meat alternatives offer advantages. This is when we compare them to conventional meat. So you might have that question too. Did we compare the different meat alternatives between themselves? No, actually we use the baseline of conventional meats. So what you see in the report is how cultivated meat will, compares to conventional meat and how insects compare them. So in general, they perform better. Of course, there are differences. So plant-based alternatives, actually products, are have a quite lowest environmental footprint. However, this depends on the level of processing. So many products are highly processed, and that will have an impact also on the overall impact they have on the environment. Insects, microbial proteins are also highly efficient protein sources, and they can have quite a low impact on the environment, especially if you use byproducts like waste streams. Precision fermentation and cultivated meat offer us an important also, let's say, category, because it's like still to be developed in the market, and some of them require very high energy. I mean, like the bioreactor, some parts of the processes are very intensive in energy. So it really depends on whether clean energy is used. One thing that we found also, and you will hear more from Hannah, is life cycle assessments still have a lot of variation because they use different methodologies. So there's a lot to be done. I think I will skip this. We know that in levels of technology, these meat alternatives that we look at are at very, very different points. Some of them are well developed. You find them in the market. You can buy them. Some of them have still to penetrate the market, and there are question marks on whether, like cultivated meat, precision fermentation will achieve that scaling up that is needed to drive the prices down and for people to afford them. So yeah, there's high variation. You can see more details there. Cost reduction and scaling is actually key barriers there. Thank you. And yes, and the innovation, thank you, Sabine. The innovation landscape is promising, but regulation is very important for the future of these technologies. Is it okay? So sorry. Okay, thank you again. So we also had a look at the human health impact. So this is very important, of course. There are many things to be said here about each specific meat alternatives, but more in general, I would like you to take this message. The report didn't have a look specifically at diets. Of course, many of the things that were said in the report have an implication for human diets, But that was not the focus of giving dietary guidance, so take it with that grain of salt. Also, the overall nutrient intake, so the capacity that, for instance, if you look into plant-based alternatives, you will see that they could have nutritional compositions that are fine, but there are some concerns about some micronutrients and their bioavailability. But overall, this depends on the overall diet of a person and not on the specific product. So that's a difficulty. You don't find a definite answer in this report. More research, of course, is needed. And in general, more long-term research, research, also randomized trials to assess the long-term impacts of many of these technologies is needed. And that's very important, especially for cultivated meat and for precision fermentation, which are still at the, let's say, beginning of their technological readiness. And then there are specific issues, like insects have maybe allergenicity issues. In precision fermentation and in other products of fermentation, there are possibilities of adverse reaction that need to be studied and understood. So that overall for the impacts on human health. Now we look also into the consumer attitude, and consumers were also a very long part of the discussion. We had trouble actually trying to synthesize all the emerging evidence on consumer attitudes. There are very specific, studies in different parts of the EU, which was our focus, just to say. There are many, generally speaking, of course, we have many studies showing that, maybe young people, urban people, people that are caring more about the environmental concerns tend to have more acceptability, tend to be more open to trying all these meat alternatives, even the newest ones. But still, there's a lot to be said, because transparency in the labeling, information to the consumers, and the different ways in which regulation and policy will evolve will also have an impact into how consumers eventually perceive these products. There are some issues like, natural products tend to be perceived more positively by consumers, but a lot of this could change in the next few years. So this evolves over time. And I will approach the end just to say there are different regulatory policy challenges. I think we just scratched really the surface. So the EU has really specific regulation, and regulation you may hear more from our expert from EFSA, looking into the safety of products, so we can feel like, I think, very safe in terms of the overall authorization of novel foods. There is also issues specific to cultivated meat and precision fermentation, as they may fall, some of the products may fall into the GMO labeling and other requirements. So it's a very complicated area. And I think overall the recommendations of the report is to support transparent, not misleading labeling that focuses on the product's function and giving clarity to consumers. That's not an easy task, but that's the challenge. We look also into social, ethical, and economic considerations. Perhaps don't expect a lot into, don't go into the report with the expectation of seeing how is this evolving from an economic point of view, or will the cultivated meat arrive to the market now or when? We didn't look into this. The specific expertise of the group focused more into looking into what are the ethical considerations that should be taken into account, for instance, animal welfare, but also the different ethical impacts on different groups. For instance, farmers, how are traditional farmers going to be impacted? How are other farmers involved? And one thing, I think very generally, it emerges in many reports, is that working together with all the involved stakeholders, involving, for instance, farmers in the uptake of these meat alternatives, will be really crucial for the future. So I think I will, unless, Bert, I think you want to go to the panel. So I think you can look into key recommendations, and I will just go into a few because I already told you about, transparency and labeling emerge as one of the issues that the experts discuss the most, like the need for having really mandatory, clear, transparent labeling of the ingredients, the nutritional value, a lot of details, but in a way that the consumer can understand it and can make informed decisions. So it's labeling and transparency, but it's also, you will see in the other recommendation, it's also important to empower the consumers to make the informed choice. So it's for science to guide these choices. And health and nutrition, I already told you, I think clear policies to guide the fortification of the plant-based and the other meat alternatives that might have some deficits in some of the nutrients will be important, but also the long-term health research will be key for providing dietary guidance to people as they take these products more. Encourage manufacturers to enhance that nutritional quality as a matter of policy will also be important. I'll skip the environmental because I went into that and the ethics, and I think I can end up here if you have questions. Or the questions are for the panel, right, Bert? Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
So as Rosa mentioned, we will have a panel, and we hope that we can encourage some participation from the audience by asking questions at that. So with that, can I ask the first panel to come forward? So that's Tilly Metz, who is an MEP for the Greens, and is a member of the Health Committee in the Parliament, as well as several other committees, as I learned, and has been very interested in this particular topic. The second person is Irina Popescu from the European Consumers Association, and then the third one is Giuseppina Luvará from the DG Research in the Commission. So we have a couple of mics there, and Rosa will be joining the panel as well. So with that, first of all, let's go to. If we go first of all to say, Tilly, whilst you're pouring some water for yourself, what is your main concern in driving the European citizen to eating less meat?
Does it work? Yes, it does. First of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you very much for the excellent work you have been doing, because I think it's really key to have exactly this analysis on the alternatives of meat, because it helps exactly to advance also in policy, and it helps also to fight fake news or misinformation or disinformation. So thank you very much for this excellent. I'm going to read it now in detail. Indeed, I was just also having a look at the summary that was sent to us. So what are the main issues that we see? Is that what your question? In order to, or the main concerns that we see regarding alternatives to meat products? But my team knows that I say that several times already. You know, it's very difficult to speak on the topic on what people are eating. Better for the animals, better for the health, but we definitely need, and that makes it also difficult, we need to have a holistic approach, because, and I think you mentioned it shortly also, it means working not only raising awareness to the consumers, but also working together with the farmers, so also helping them to make this transition to have this diversification also in their activities. So it tackles a lot of topics, but what we know definitely that is that meat is classified as red meat, especially. It's classified as cancerogenic, but also processed meat even more. So there are facts that we know. We know that the impact on the environment is huge. Thousands of liters that are water that are needed for 1 kilogram of production of beef. Then we have also the issue with antimicrobial resistance. We know that we give a lot in intensive farming systems. We give preventionally a lot of antibiotics to the animals that are afterwards eaten. So it's also an issue of antimicrobial resistance. So we all know, I think people know that we need to change something, that we need to push in further research, and also looking at the long-term impact on health of certain alternatives to meat. But we need to tackle it, and it's really as I said, talking about what people have on the plate is really touching a taboo, and especially for Greens, as we are always seeing, oh, they want to forbid us everything. No, it's opening the door to more opportunities.
Thank you. So, Irina, so in terms of these opportunities, what do you see as the main sort of impediments for people to make that change? And do you think that they have enough information on what is actually in the products that they eat?
Yep. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having us. Yeah, the report I read with great interest, and I think you have outlined really good points that also pertain to consumer perceptions. And I can actually, I think what Tilly just mentioned is a very important point, that quite often the discussion around food and around diets can be quite emotional, and it's a topic that is quite difficult to talk about sometimes, especially at EU level. But the way we look at it is exactly that it is not only about consumer information and consumer awareness about these products, but that in fact, despite having the best intentions when we go into a supermarket or when we go to eat out, there's other factors that influence our food choices, and we don't make food choices in a vacuum. So the jargony term for this is food environments, but you can see them as all these factors that influence consumer food choices. So it can be marketing, advertisement, price, of course, being a very important one to consumers, availability, what's there for you to choose from. But also it can be as simple as the layout of the supermarkets. So we see that these current food environments are actually pushing consumers towards less healthy and less sustainable choices. So towards products that we know we should consume less of. So as Tilly just mentioned, we know that we do consume too much meat. Our diets are very high in fat, in calories, in sugars and salt. And we do not eat enough fruit and vegetables. We don't eat enough pulses, whole grains. So there are ways that food environments can actually push you towards products that we should eat more of. And this is something that we really want to highlight, that there are opportunities to make these choices easy for consumers. Because at the moment, this is unfortunately not the easy choice. And as I said, even if you have the best intentions, you will still be pushed towards one product or another. And we know that meat alternatives are very important here, because especially ththese products, such as plant-based alternatives, they can offer very easy ways into dietary shifts for consumers. So if consumers have their favorite dish that was traditionally made with meat, they can now have products to choose from, or to make a vegetarian alternative altogether based on pulses, for example. So these products are very important for consumers to change their diets, and we do see that they're very interested in changing their diets also for environmental reasons, for health reasons, animal welfare.
Thank you. So, Giuseppina, so you are representing the Commission in the research. So what sort of gaps do we have in our knowledge now in relation to some of these products? Do we understand them sufficiently well to come forward with some form of science-based recommendations in that? And what is the innovation environment in the whole process of research at the moment that would help us to make that type of advice more scientifically stringent and scientifically based?
Thank you for the invitation, and I have to say that of course a lot of challenges and weaknesses that you identified in the report, let's say, are already pretty known, and also have been also raised by several projects that we founded under Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe has given a lot of opportunities to continue research. We have many other projects than those that are in the report that also look at different protein sources, algae, insect, animal cells, etc. Something that I really like a lot also of the report, and allow me to say this, is a little bit also the definition of alternative proteins. because today there are still, as you also highlight, there is no European definition, and I think it's important also when we communicate that alternative protein are not only plant-based protein. And this is something, one criticism that I have to say, where I hope the scientists maybe will help the policymaker in the communication on that, is the word cultivated meat, because it's not really the word that we also use. We prefer to talk about cell culture meat, because cultivated meat is a little bit, to say, difficult, and also with the perception, already give a bad perception to the people. Now, going back to your question, so we found that we have a very important policy, which we call Food 2030, is the research innovation policy, which has been launched through Horizon Europe. And in that particular policy, we look at different pathways, and one is alternative proteins. And another one which is linked to alternative protein is the healthy diet and nutrition. We try always, when we draft our topic, to address the main gaps. And the main gaps usually comes from the academia, from industry, but also from the policy. And in drafting this topic, we also look at the most important policy initiative that we have. Last year we have a biotechnology, the biotech communication, and I invite also all of you also to look at the open consultation that is open on the Biotech Act until the 10th of November. So I take also this opportunity. And there, one of the main challenges was the consumer awareness. And that's why we said, okay, a lot of projects address this as a policy recommendation, the consumer awareness, the consumer perceptions, but we don't have a topic that really needs also to involve the member states, because member states play an important role also in this discussion. And so we have this topic in the World Program 25, where there will be also proposal. We expect a very good proposal coming by the 16th of September, and try a little bit to address also this big challenge that also you highlighted in the report. Regarding the innovation, of course, in Horizon Europe, we have also the European Innovation Council, where I really look at the scaling up production. And there we have a very good investment in the framework of 2021-2027, and we, in the agri-food, the biotech, we invested 110 million. And we have a very good reality where a lot of startups has also used this instrument. They are a European startup where they produce alternative protein coming from microalgae, coming from yeast, where really they stay in the European market. And what is important as a gap that now today we are seeing in particular in this part of the innovation phase is that we want the company to stay in the EU. Take EU funding, but they have also to put in the EU the product. So we don't want our company to go outside the United States, and just because they have a quicker authorization approval, they put their product in the United States. So this is something that also is important, and we are looking also in the future how to avoid this dislocation and really to concentrate also the company to stay in the EU.
Thank you. So Rosa, so in terms of the overall choices that we had to make in the report, you said we focused on those five products. Can you first of all sort of just say a little bit about each of them, and just to say where you see the main issues are in relation to all of them, specifically in relation to human health aspects? Can you do that for us?
Thank you, sure. I mean, I'll try. I'll go maybe with the one that is, but I think I mentioned it, but just to go into that, into the specific project. It's true, Giuseppina, what you said, even about the nomenclature, I mean, the names. We spent quite a lot of time in defining the names, and there was like, yeah, experts saying, no, we should call it cultivated meat, or we should call it cell-based, or Yeah, there are so many multiple names. We went for the one that resonated a bit more with the EU policies, but we had feedback also into the cell-based. Yeah, definitely not preempting the choices of consumers by assuming a name that gives a connote would be important. So starting from let's say the cell-based or cultivated meat, there were also issues, actually, just to say something about the nomenclature. It was not only about what the name says about the product, but also where do you draw the line. Because, for instance, in precision fermentation, and in some of the categories, there might be like hybrid products, first of all. So there are products that maybe combine plant-based, but also fermentation, and cultivated meat as well. So there might be like some elements of the cultivated meat or the cell-based meat that are using products of fermentation or incorporating plant-based. There could be, at least. So that said, of course, the newest technologies, so to say, attract a lot of attention, and that was the same in the group. I think there were quite a lot of researchers that are active on cultivated meat. Either they are looking into the consumer aspects of cultivated meat, so we had a few in the group, and then regarding you say specifically the health impacts. Of course, in these newest technologies, whereas, for instance, they cultivated meat. In terms of human health, cultivated meat, I mean, the theory tells us that it could recreate the good qualities of meat. So from a nutritional point of view, it could be having your meat, but even further, it could be leaner meat, right? It could be meat that has less fat. Whether that's good for the consumer, I don't know, because fat actually gives flavor, so it's more complicated. But in theory, you could say it could be, from a health point of view, it could be as good as conventional meat, addressing all the proteins, nutrients that the person has, without the, let's say, animal welfare, except that the cells sometimes come from animals. So that's a possibility. It could even, for some of the evidence we found, it could be even better because of this, less fat, or even you could add supplements that people need, for instance. But the thing that is missing in the very new technologies is the scientific evidence about the long-term effects on people's health. So we will need the studies, and we will need more people to consume these products, which at the moment are very niche. You can have them if you have a lot of money, or if you're part of a big trial maybe, or something like that. And that applies a little bit to precision fermentation. So long term, we don't know, but it could be good. Fermentation seems to address some of the issues in the nutritional availability of some nutrients that are lacking or are a bit deficient in purely plant-based diets. And then we go into the ones that we know best. So plant-based diets have been, even outside of Europe, is actually the most common. So the health effects are more studied, but, and there I add the word of caution, which took us a lot of time in the drafting. One thing is to have a look at the evidence, the scientific evidence on diet, studies on diet, and another thing is to apply those to specific products. So our report focuses on the different products, and so just to take the example, if you eat some of these products, but you integrate your diet in one way, very healthy, with lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, things that the scientific evidence is very strong on, you will have a different effect, in my view, even as a lawyer. I'm not a doctor, of course, than if you take those products and you have a terrible diet. So that's why we insist. The report doesn't give dietary guidance, but it gives some hints, because the report is also targeting policymakers, some hints into you should pay attention into this, and maybe incorporate some of this into your policies, or into your discussions about policies and the projects you fund, and so on.
Yeah, so you emphasize the difficulty, in particular in assessing the health effects of these products. Today I just read a sort of Nature communication paper on the idea and that ultra-processed foods are particularly bad for you, but in a sense it's difficult to know what is ultra-processed and what isn't. But I think it's, and the only way to do it, and so in some studies have been done, which are quite difficult, is in terms of randomly controlled trials. You almost have to put the people in a hospital and so put them in on 2 weeks on one food and 2 weeks on another and see what the effect is. Not a very natural situation, obviously, for most of the consumers. But I think coming back to this issue of labeling, I mean, do you think that it is an important one? Because at the end of the day, we know that, for example, all the corn products which are eaten in Europe are not eaten in the US because it has to be sold as mold there, mold is something you see growing on your wall. And so as a result, people don't buy it in the same sort of quantities as is the case here. So naming the products obviously is an important one. So Irina, do you have any further comment on that?
Yes, thank you for this question. And thank you for bringing it up. Yes, we do think that labeling, of course, is super important. The names of these products are very important because, as I said before, consumers are choosing these products to use them in a particular way, and they need to know exactly what the product is. So we know there's been a lot of discussions always and over the years about what plant-based products should be called. And our view is, and we have been consulting members on this for years, we've been monitoring the discussions, is that the prevailing view is that consumers are not concerned or confused about these names, providing that it's clearly labeled as vegan or vegetarian. So I'm talking about plant-based alternatives to meat here, and we don't have insights for the moment on cultivated meat or precision fermentation or any other type. But just to say that this debate is often held in the name of consumer protection, but we found in our recent consultation with our consumer organizations that are our members that they have actually not been consulted in this recent push of trying to ban some meaty names for plant-based products, and this is quite concerning, I think. But we do, of course, see that it's very important that these products are clearly labeled, but it's not an issue that's happening at consumer level.
Mm-hmm. Giuseppina?
Yeah, and the point is also that if we want that these products are accessible, they have to be also affordable to everybody. And the price of this product today are the double of the standard price. So I don't know if the labeling can add something, but I think that also something that we need to look a little bit how we are going to reduce the price of this product. Because it's true that the production required more energy, so they have a different, there are different investments. So the product goes to the market with a very higher price, and not everybody can have access.
Yeah.
It's not, so it's something that needs also to be considered. And together with the labeling, for me, is more the education of the people that is also important. So before, thinking about how to label things is how you prepare people a little bit, what kind of information, what kind of education you are giving to the citizen.
Tilly, do you have another comment on that?
Speaking about the price, I know that the word or the concept that is completely en vogue now is to speak about competitiveness. But then let's be honest also about competitiveness. You know how much it costs to clean our water pollution because of the production of meat. We are speaking there about 25 billion euros in 2022, the water pollution from animal-sourced food. That is the reality. So let's put also the real price then on meat. If we would do that, we would have enormous, huge amounts of money to push into research and to make the more alternative, more environment-friendly alternatives to meat more accessible for everybody. So, also, I wanted to say it in the second panel, but I say it right now. You know that the livestock is using 77% of the farming land for how many calories? 18%. So it's completely an investment that is every economist, and I'm not an economist, but if you say you lose 77% of the farming land and you produce 80% of the calories, but that is a bad investment. That is at least what I can say. And then, of course, the livestock sector produces 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions of the whole agriculture sector. Again, an argument to say that we need to invest in the alternative. So if we speak about the price, yes, we need to rethink and we need to put the real price on meat, on real meat from animals. That is what I want to say. And then I'm very happy that my neighbor said that consumers are not stupid. I mean, they know exactly when there's a veggie burger that is a veggie burger. So plant-based, they know that exactly. But we are voting on the Common Market Organization on Monday, and again, we have an amendment asking that we cannot use the word burger for the veggie burger. So it's an ongoing story for people thinking that consumers are stupid. But for all the people, it's pretty clear what is a veggie burger. That's just 2 remarks I want to make. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I think obviously the naming of the products has been one. The cost is of course, and still certainly in our early discussions with people in Singapore, where these products, particularly cultivated meat, had penetrated quite substantially, was that people are willing to pay a little bit more. If it is 50% more, then they start to say maybe not. But essentially, what you see, of course, certainly in the Singapore market, the price of chicken was something like 10 times the normal price of chicken. And so these products really have to develop a lot more in order to be able even to penetrate the market to a substantial extent.
No, we have to.
That is not the real price.
Yeah, and then we have money to make the others cheaper. But may I ask a question to Rosa? I have a question on the report. May I? I just do. No, I had a question because on the impact, there was one critic on, shall I now say, cell-cultivated meat. You said that is an issue of waste management. I read that in the summary. And for me, that was not really clear what is meant by that. If you could, if you have in mind how to explain to a MEP what is exactly, so they need concrete examples to understand.
Really, I would love to answer that, but I don't think I have it on the top of my head. But maybe if we have, we will have an expert actually joining very soon on the second panel before not. So Hannah will be giving an explanation. We don't have her on real time, but she's the one that knows all the technicalities. But otherwise, I can promise to come back to you in written and with the clarification. I'm not. But if I may add something on the labeling and the transparency, just very quickly, I think it was, no, I don't want to repeat all the things that were said because it was discussed very heavily by the experts. They considered that this was very important. Along with this, I think we also, I don't know how to call it, but maybe, we discussed the fact that there's the requirements on labeling and what you require of one meat alternative. To be fair, you should require it of all, and also on conventional meat, right? So like if you're asking the producers to disclose, for instance, what's their environmental footprint, but what is other, impacts that their product have, the consumer should also have access to this about conventional meat, but about cultivated meat, precision-based, and plant-based products. So we discuss both, not only thinking that, transparency and labeling will solve all the issues, but...
Okay, I think to a large extent, this is a very good segue into our second presentation by Hannah to Misto, who is going to talk to you, unfortunately, from Sofia. Essentially, she is a person who is doing a lot of the life cycle assessment for some of the products. I think what I'm going to do in order to have time to ask, if you have questions in relation to all aspects of it, to come forward with them in the question and answer session to the second panel. Okay. Hannah, you're
Yes,
happy
hello,
to start?
everybody. Yes, I'm very happy to start. And yeah, sorry for not being able to be there. I'm actually here in Sofia at one of the Horizon Europe project consortium meetings, so Giant Leaps, which is also about alternative proteins. So we are speaking here about the same topics. And so yeah, I will just share my slides. Okay, can you now see them? Okay, guess so. Yes. So the aim of my talk today is to maybe a little bit clarify the issues with life cycle assessments of novel meat alternatives and alternative proteins, because you have probably all seeing a lot of different kind of results and news about the environmental impacts of cell-cultivated meat and other novel meat alternatives, and it's not always so easy to understand what the results actually mean. So I will start with a short introduction to life cycle assessment. So life cycle assessment is the method that is most commonly used for assessing environmental impacts of products and services. And the idea is that the impacts are assessed along the whole life cycle of the product, starting from the natural resources extraction up to the waste management. And the method is standardized by the International Standardization of or the ISO standard, and but this standard still gives quite a lot of freedom for how to perform the life cycle assessment. So that's why if you take two studies, two life cycle assessments from different studies, and then compare the impacts, you don't necessarily you cannot compare the results because they may have used different choices for the methods, and that's why the results are not comparable. And to tackle with this challenge, the European Commission has started this environmental footprint project that aims to develop standardized guidelines for specific product groups, how to do life cycle assessment in a way that it is possible to compare the results. And this is specifically targeted for companies, so that when companies estimate the impacts of their products, then they have to use this method, and then these guidelines could also reduce green washing, and also that it is possible to compare the results from different companies. And then there is no, at the moment, guideline for alternative proteins, so this could be something to develop in the future as well. And cellular agriculture has been already mentioned many times, but I will still quickly clarify what the terms mean here. So cellular agriculture is it means the use of cell culturing technologies for producing agricultural products, and it can be divided to two different groups based on the product type. So there are these cellular products, for example, cell-cultivated meat is an example of that. Then also microbial proteins, when the whole cell is used for the final product, belongs to this cellular product category. And then these acellular products are those where microbes have been genetically modified to synthesize some protein, for example, milk proteins or egg white proteins, and the cell is not used for the final product, but only the protein or fatty acid that the cells produce. And this technology is also called precision fermentation. And then these cellular agriculture products can be divided based on the carbon source, because most of them require carbohydrates, so some agricultural crops as source of carbon. But then there are these gas fermented organisms, some microbes that are able to use CO2 or methane as a source of carbon. So these are exciting because they don't need any agricultural land for the production. And first I will talk about cell cultivated meat. And so this is really meat that is produced by taking first cells from the animal and then multiplying them and producing in bioreactors. And the cells that have been multiplied can already be used for the final product. So many companies now are just using these single cells to the final product. And but then the other step would be to differentiate the cells to muscle fibers, and then in that phase the cells don't duplicate anymore, but they start to build the muscle tissue. So then in theory it could be possible to produce a steak. But this is more resource consuming and more difficult also at the moment. But then this is also affecting a lot on the environmental impact of cell cultivated meat, whether it is only these single cells or if it's more developed muscle tissue. And here are all the studies, the life cycle assessment studies that have been published in scientific peer-reviewed journals so far. And you can see here the carbon footprint and land use results of these studies, and you can see that there is a lot of variation in the results, and this is because the processes have used different types of cells, different kind of feedstock for the culture medium that is used to feed the cells, different bioreactor systems as well, different production locations and energy sources. But this last one really stands out. You may have seen this news recently about that cultivated meat has 25 times higher carbon footprint than beef, and it's because of this study, because in some of the scenarios they found really high carbon footprint, and this was because they included this kind of purification process for the ingredients. So all the feedstock that went into the cultivated meat production was purified using very energy intensive process, and this then increased the carbon footprint because there was fossil energy included in the energy mix. And but then this kind of purification process is not actually needed for cultivated meat feedstock, because it is possible to use food or feed grade ingredients. So they basically assumed the use of pharma grade ingredients. So in that sense, this is kind of irrelevant study. And this highlights why it is really important that experts are involved in these discussions about the potential of alternative proteins, and also helping to interpret these kind of life cycle assessment studies and other studies as well. And so in this figure, you now see the relative impacts per unit of protein of different alternative protein sources. And these that are in a box, they are livestock-based proteins. So beef has the highest land use and carbon footprint of compared to any other protein sources. Poultry has substantially lower land use and carbon footprint than beef, and this is because beef or bovine animals are ruminants, so they produce methane as a part of their digestion process, so that's why they have so high carbon footprint, and also they need more feed than poultry, so that's why also the land use is so much higher. Then when we look at these alternative proteins, there is plant-based, so legumes, and remember that these are per unit of protein, but there is a huge variation as well for the land use of different plant-based or like legumes, beans, and peas. There is insects, and there is also for insects huge variation because there are different types of insects, different types of production methods, different systems, and microalgae. That's the same. There are lots of different ways of producing microalgae. The energy use in some of the microalgae systems is really high. And then these cell-cultivated foods. So there is cultivated meat, precision fermented proteins, and the gas fermented proteins. So here land use is generally relatively low for these because they require less feedstock to produce the same amount of protein than these other protein sources. But then energy use is relatively high, and especially for cultivated meat, it can be really high. And these, of course, still have lots of uncertainty because the cultivated meat production processes especially are still under development, and these are just the first estimates of the possibilities. And carbon footprint for these cell-cultivated products depend on the energy source. So if renewable energy sources are used, then the carbon footprint can be really low. But then, of course, for these that require the use of glucose as a source of carbon, they have also some other emissions from agriculture or the other processes to produce the feedstock. And so then my take-home messages. So the studies generally show that the novel meat alternatives can reduce the environmental impacts compared to livestock meat. There is a high variation between different products and production systems. There are high uncertainties, especially for these products that are still under development, because there are many ways how the energy intensity could be, for example, reduced or optimized. And then, yes, life cycle assessment results need to be really interpreted with caution because there are many factors that affect the results, like from the methodological point of view, but then also depending on what kind of systems have been assessed. And standardization of the methods would be good for the alternative proteins as well, that we could actually compare the results of different life cycle assessment studies. And then sometimes people ask, like, why do you do these life cycle assessments for products that are still under development? But they are actually really good for identifying the hotspots and informing the development of the production already at the early stages, that it's still possible to steer the development of the products towards more sustainable choices. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. So Hannes, please stay online. And are there any specific questions from either the public or the audience or from the panel members relating to her presentation? And please, you have to wait until a microphone gets to you, because unless you speak in the mic, the people online will not be able to hear what you say.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Ivan Larandel from the Royal Academy of Belgium here. And I'm also professor at the University of Louvain, the French-speaking one. I'm really convinced that life cycle assessment is a key to make the right decisions regarding the future of proteins. I'm wondering about the concept of nutritional life cycle assessment. Would you be so kind and give some comments on that? And another point, maybe minor, is that in the results that you have shown, you have not mentioned the results regarding eggs and also dairy products, but especially eggs, which might become also a classical but also an alternative protein source that has been completely forgotten for future studies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I had eggs and milk here in the figure as well. And so yes, about the nutritional LCA. So actually, my research group has been working on these nutritional LCAs as well. So that means that, for example, in this figure, we allocated the impacts per unit of protein. But yeah, of course, alternative proteins don't only provide protein, but there are many different nutrients as well, and the micronutrient composition, the vitamins and minerals are very different in different products. So then this nutritional LCA uses nutritional score as a unit. So the impacts are not allocated per kilogram of product or kilogram of protein, but it is a nutritional score that considers different nutrients. And actually, me and my co-authors, we published recently a paper where we proposed this kind of nutritional score suitable for protein-rich food specifically. So then basically including those kind of nutrients that we generally get from protein sources. And this also, so then it basically means that the more nutrients, these good nutrients there are, the lower the environmental impact as well would be. Like if the emissions would be the same for two different products, but the other product has more good nutrients, then that product gets lower impact as well. So it's at the same time like an environmental and nutritional content information. So yeah, and that is, and then also we have been developing these kind of ideas of considering also the protein availability. So considering the because these different protein sources have different availability of these proteins and also the availability of nutrients. So then that should be also then used, like not only the amount of the nutrients in the product, but rather the available nutrients in the products.
Thank you, Hannah. There's one further question there. Can you identify yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Amy. I am here also with Tilly. And my question was also about the graphic before, and especially about the energy use of cultivated meat. Maybe it's also a more general question to you. Why would we then still continue investing in cultivated meat if we know by research that it uses this much energy? Like, what is the real benefit other than, okay, we can reproduce this without animal harm, but like, is there a real use on contrary to the other alternatives, for example? Thank you.
Yeah, so it's good to remember that these studies, so yeah, first of all, there are only few studies for cultivated meat, so we need a lot more studies. All of these studies are only estimating what the impact of large-scale production could be, and these are not even like really large scale, so they are based on modeling using laboratory scale results and then modeling what a bit larger scale production system would look like. So there is a huge uncertainty, there is a lot of possibilities to reduce the environmental impact and or the energy use as well. And then a lot of the energy use is also coming from the production of the culture medium, so the nutrition or the feedstock, how the cells have been fed. So there are also, because some of them, or the standard feedstock includes synthetic amino acids, which are also very energy intense to produce. So then there is a lot of potential to develop different sources of nutrients that uses less energy. So obtaining amino acids directly from the crops, for example. So then, yeah, so this is not like, shouldn't be interpreted that the cultivated meat would always have that high energy use. And then on the other hand, the energy use is not really an issue in terms of cost. So the other things are impacting the cost than the energy. And also for the climate impact, the carbon footprint, then it depends on what kind of source of electricity is used. So if renewable electricity is used, then the climate impact can be much lower.
Okay, so Hanna, there's one further question from the panel from
No,
Giuseppina.
just also to answer to this question that indeed there are also different bioreactor, how this happens. So sometimes in animal cell you have a different bioreactor than in precision fermentation. And what we have also to invest and what also we do through our project under Horizon Europe is to look at the alternative of the different bioreactor and to look at the cost and the energy saving or resources that really, because you can have also new generation of bioreactor. But on that really we need also some business model to be put in place in order really to understand how this can work in order to reduce indeed the use of water or other kind of energy for this production.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So the bioreactors, there is a lot of potential to improve the bioreactors because these kind of animal cell bioreactors haven't been really scaled up previously. So then, yeah, this also requires development. And then also, actually, what I forgot to say is about the energy use. So this energy is only the industrial energy. So basically, the energy that is required for like electricity, etc. But it doesn't consider the feedstock energy, so what is included in the feed. So, for example, for beef production, the land use is much higher. So then basically beef requires a lot of more feed than cultivated meat. So then we can actually save a lot of land. So then if we would also quantify the energy use in the feed, then actually beef would have higher total energy use. I have done those kind of figures as well, but I didn't have time to include it in this presentation. But so then, of course, we could also think about what we could do with all of this released land area that if we would replace beef with cultivated meat, so then maybe some using renewable energy.
Thanks, Anna. There are two more questions. I can only two for the time.
I don't know who was first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Christine. I work at the European Vegetarian Union. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but hearing you all, first of all, I'm very happy about this report. As Tilly said, it's so important for us to have like science-based, I was going to say opinions, but actually not opinions, but just scientists looking at these things and giving us a basis for talking to policymakers. But looking at all of this, I understand, as Rosa said, that the newer technologies are getting a lot of attention. They have potential to kind of split people, but there are already these kind of established alternatives, and they don't have to be super processed. There has been like plant protein in like heavily used in, for example, the Mediterranean diet for decades. There are already these well-established plant alternatives. Wouldn't it be a way forward to kind of agree, okay, we all know we're not, as Irina said, we're not eating enough pulses in general, that's something that we could push, and it would benefit farmers because they grow these foods. It's not this threat of something that will come out of a laboratory, which I understand is an existential threat to a lot of farmers, even though they would still provide the medium. But if we focus on plant-based foods and mostly whole foods, it's something that wouldn't necessarily go against farmers, and then they could benefit from it. It's something that we could push in public procurement. It's something I do see. You mentioned also the ultra-processed foods. I see it also a bit as an attack on alternatives. But there are a lot of alternatives that don't need to necessarily be ultra-processed. And even if they are, as you said, there is a lot to look at there. If there is good and bad ultra-processed.
Can I just for the time, can you formulate the question?
Yes,
that
the question is maybe from the report, and I'm looking forward to reading in detail, is something that we could all agree on. The alternatives that we know that can be pushed safely, where we have consumer studies, where we have health studies that show that they're not dangerous and that they have the biggest impact, positive impact environmentally, are plant-based alternatives, and those should be pushed. And there is, for example, right now a campaign from the Danish presidency, but also with a lot of support in the European Parliament, to have an action plan to support plant-based foods in Europe. Is that something that you think most of the experts who worked on this report could agree on?
Yeah, I could maybe start on this because the fact is that these cell-cultivated products, cultivated meat, precision fermented proteins, etc., they still require a lot of development before they are affordable and available in the supermarkets widely. So definitely now we need to focus on plant-based alternatives, because the plant-based alternatives are already available. We can and also like they don't need to be processed, so then basically just using legumes, beans and peas, like in many Asian and African cultures, they are very commonly used for making delicious food without much processing. So then definitely that would be the best way first to tackle the diet transition, to switch to plant-based foods, and then these would come like later and maybe targeted for those who really have struggle with or have allergies or some kind of sensitivities to plant-based or legumes, beans. So then these cell-cultivated foods would be for those who cannot use.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Can I have a short question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Very short question. I'm Alice Bergouin for Euractiv. I'm wondering what's your view on the demand from consumers, because I see that the insect food market, for example, is really struggling in finding people to buy their products, and they are turning to animal feed. So from the EASAC report or other studies, what do you see on consumer demand?
Yeah, so insects are not really that much. They were like a few years ago, there was some kind of boom of insects, that there were some new products coming, and consumers wanted to try them, and then it looked like that there is an increase in the demand, but then they didn't continue using them. So insects for food are, at the moment, I think insect production is more focusing on feed in Europe. So yeah, maybe better to focus on the other alternative proteins.
Okay, thank you, Hanna. There's one comment and from Irina.
I'm going to be very, very brief on this. In terms of consumer perception of insects specifically, we have data from 2020, so it's a while ago now, when we did a survey, and it's true that at that point the appetite was quite low for insects. So I think it was something around 13% said that they would be willing to replace meat with insects. But we do know that there's different studies out there that show higher consumer acceptance, and that these things do take quite some time, and especially with new products, with novel foods, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of things that can be pinpointed to these foods because we don't know that much about them. So I think there's definitely room for it. But yeah, as you mentioned, the consumer acceptance of these novel foods is quite slow to begin with.
Thank you. So it's time to move on to our second panel discussion, and we have enough space on the tableau here. So can I introduce first of all Professor Das Neves from EFSA, who is joining us as chief scientist from EFSA, and also Anders Christiansen, the representative of the Danish Ministry of Agriculture, who's now working at the UN and the WTO. So in terms of the questions that we see for these particular products, do you see that there are going to be questions about how we can regulate them and how can we quickly do that in order to provide an innovative and sort of competitive environment in Europe for the development of these products?
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon as well from my side and from EFSA. Perhaps before I get there, let me just do a little bit of a warm-up. First, of course, the thanks to the academies for this report. And let me try to contextualize why I say thank you, because I think it's needed. It's important to put these documents out and to put this in paper, even if it's digitally. First, also recognize that, sometimes I get a little this gut feeling that we are talking of these alternatives as if we all remembered about this 2 or 3 years ago. It's something new. And the fact is that you mentioned food is a passion, but food innovation has been at the key of food systems for thousands of years. It's just part of how food moves forward. And it has been like this, as I mentioned, since the beginning of times, probably always sided with some skepticism. And I hear now people are afraid of fermentation. I'm sure Sumerians 8,000 years ago, when they by chance produced beer, there were probably some locals a little skeptical about that, little strange urine look-alike drink that got you crazy after 2 liters. And we've seen this over the centuries. When we brought potatoes to Europe, huge skepticism. I'm guilty, I'm Portuguese. We did it with the Spanish. And just now in the 50s, remembering even a conference a few months ago I joined, long before I was born, but I saw the news about the huge skepticism of mechanization of agriculture. It's going to destroy agriculture. Farmers are going to disappear off the face of the planet. I think we survived. So we're at a new stage. It's again a little skepticism, but there is something that is different, I think, and that is why this report makes a difference. We know a lot more. Science has been now able to dig deeper and deeper and deeper, so the level of the granularity to which we can analyze and screen things has increased. The consumers are more and more educated, more and more demanding, and want to be more and more inclusive. And the most important thing for me why I like to read this report is the last thing, which is perhaps not the good one. Also, we see more and more as disease spreading of misinformation, lack of knowledge, mistrust in science. And in topics which are innovative, disruptive, and there is skepticism, it's really important they make decisions right, based on correct information. And if there are areas where there's a lot of misinformation circulating, I think novel foods is a good example. So that said, I read it with interest, and you brought to ask me what are the challenges of regulation. Many. But I would like to highlight 3, which I also pick up from the report. Speed is one that I'm also oftenly accused of. sometimes by the colleagues here. And speeds, say that we in Europe, we are too slow, we stop innovation, we destroy it, we don't allow these ideas to move forward and so on. It's not a total lie. I mean, speed is an issue. And let me just then explain why I think it's an issue. It's an issue because we know more and more. And the more we know, the further we have to dig and find out all the available information. And this is not an easy balance. When is enough science enough? So if you ask the scientists, there is never enough. We can always, and we should always go further. For a policymaker, at some point, someone needs to decide, we have enough, we'll make a decision, and we take the responsibility for that decision. And here in novel foods, we have a little bit of this situation. Some of these products are new, we are lacking data, we are lacking sufficient information about the process, the nutrition composition, and this is not easy to handle. We need more data, we need more information, which is to say we need more science. And this means to the second difficulty of speed, when I say we need more science, not just to discover one more cell-based meat, one more new fermented product, but to close this gap between what science is discovering at the front of science, the ERC grantees winning Nobel Prizes on food systems, and then what we need as a regulatory agencies to be able to give advice. And this gap is also science. Sometimes it's methodology development, data consolidation, validations. Not very popular. Scientists don't really like this type of work. It doesn't give you publications in Nature. It doesn't improve your H index. Sometimes the funding agencies don't like to fund it. But without this done, we will be telling you, we're not sure, we can't tell you for certain. And uncertainty in Europe, with the precautionary approach we have, transforms in refusal of approval. So this is a big challenge to speed. The other one, and the last one I highlight, I'm sorry if a little long, is brain power. Brain power that needs to be on the scientists, on the member states, on all of us that work together, but also where a lot of the knowledge is. And a lot of knowledge is in the industry, the innovators. And to highlight one example that EFSA is a little mention here in the report for, and one sentence I disagree actually with the report that says the Americans are more proactive. Be careful with the proactive. I would say some of them, sometimes they are a little reactive. They'll sell it, and then if someone dies, we'll look into it. If I want to be a little ironic. We are a little not proactive. I think we're quite proactive and very precautionary. But there's one thing we're not proactive. I can tell you that right now, 70 to 80% of the applications we received in novel foods do not have the quality to go through the process from A to Z, which means we get them, and as soon as they arrive, we send them back. It's not good enough, you're missing data, you're missing this, you're missing that. We are, however, not allowed to talk to them before they submit the application, to tell them and to help them, before you send those 500 pages, please do this, do that. And that's not allowed, and it's a decision of the legislator many years ago, for many good reasons, some scandals, to keep a very strong Chinese wall between us, assessors, and the industry. And perhaps it's time to think, can we move a little bit from the guilty until proven innocent to the innocent until proven guilty, and find a way to dialogue with these people to avoid them, as I mentioned, because then it doesn't take 9 months. Yeah. It takes 2-3 years. And I'm very sorry, but I am handcuffed. And here is something also for the legislator to think. So sorry if I'm a little long, but I wanted to give you a full brief idea of speed. It's mentioned several times in your report, and it's good to explain what speed or lack of that means.
Okay. I'd just like to introduce the last member of the panel, and that is Anders Christiansen. Anders is coming from Denmark, and Denmark has a presidency at the moment, and there are a number of events that are going to take place during that presidency that are relevant to meat alternatives, and we shall put the details of those events on the EASAC website in order to give them some sort of publicity. But it comes from Denmark, and Denmark, of course, is a country which is very heavily involved in livestock production. And so you could imagine that a report on meat alternatives would create a certain amount of stir. But what you see, and he has been involved very heavily in trying to actually make all sectors of society come together in this particular project. So Anders, can you give us a sort of overview of what has been done in Denmark and what might be a good sort of exemplar for other countries?
This is not to say that that is easy to copy, but I'll tell you what we have done in Denmark. Yes, as you say, you're probably one of the countries in the world who has the biggest livestock production compared to the size of our population. But at the same time, I think when we are a small country, 6 million inhabitants, we easily come together, speak together. And back in 2021, I think the politicians, but also Farmers Association and the environmental organizations could see that maybe something should be done. So during a lot of months, there were negotiations on a new agricultural agreement. How should the landscape be? How should we live up to the Water Framework Directive, to the greenhouse gas emissions target of 70% reduction in 2030? There was the Danish Climate Act who said that we should reach that, and the politicians succeeded, with the help of the ministries, of course, to do a very broad agricultural agreement on these issues. And one of the things that there was discussion was, of course, the amount of livestock that we have in Denmark. And you could imagine that one part of Parliament said we should reduce that. We should not have so many animals. The other wing, you could say, of the Parliament said, no, we should not have any limitations. So what they agreed on was not to have any text on reduction, but they also agreed to boost the plant-based production. So they decided that we should make a Danish action plan for plant-based foods. We did that. It was launched in October 2023, and that was when I was back in Denmark. Now I'm in Geneva. And that was the result of a very cross-sectoral process with all different ministries, not only the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries, also the Environmental Ministry, the Ministry for Climate, the Finance Ministry, the Ministry of Education, and so on and so forth. And we put together this program, what to do, because when we talk about educating people, it's not only citizens, it is also the kitchen professionals. And I think that's, so when we talk about also the Education Ministry taking part of this, is that they have a policy that supports that we have more plant-based food. Also in public procurement, we have certain rules that should be obeyed too. Just to mention some of the things, but the biggest clue of this is that we have this plant-based food grant, and it has been pledged even more money than it did in 2021. So now we have a food grant with around 170 million euros to different projects throughout the value chain, from research in one end and to processing ideas, to campaigns, and also to the selling point and so on. So we tried to do this comprehensive plan, and that's what we also urge to be done on the European level now. We would like to do that, and that's why we have the Plant Food Summit, which you mentioned. It's 20th and 1st of October. in Copenhagen, I think. I'm not involved in it myself. And another thing we did also 2 months later, we did a protein strategy which are dealing with some of the issues that this report from EASAC is dealing with. It's not only new techniques, it's also about not inventing the wheel again. For example, we had a big production of peas in Denmark back in the 1950s, 60s, and now it's very, very low. We have the knowledge. Maybe we should up it again and produce some more peas. It's also faba beans and so on. So and one thing that we also support from the governmental side is the green refinery of grass, so that we could put the grass into our pigs, not only for feed for the cows, and eventually maybe we could refine the grass also to be eaten by humans. So I think I will stop there. That will be my introduction.
All right, thank you very much. Just before I open it to the floor, Tilly, I want to ask you, so at the moment 60% of our protein comes from animals in Europe, 40% from plants. So that is a very large shift from what it once was. We know, and we highlighted in the report, that you can certainly reduce that consumption of proteins from animal sources to 35% without any products or any problems in relation to health. How are we going to get the European consumer to make that choice, that shift?
Yeah, that's a good question. You speak that we need different professionals and stakeholders on board, and you mentioned it. It comes also the people that in education, but also from the health sector, etc. So that we have all the stakeholders on board, and also from child on. I mean, positive is, and I'm very happy that now we have the Danish presidency, where I know that you have this. Strategic, this roadmap, and that Denmark is on the other hand, I know there's a high production on livestock and pigs especially, but on the other hand you have clearly the aim to have more plant-based proteins, and that is really great. And what is foreseen at the European level is really to have also a protein plan. I think it's foreseen for next year, as far as I normally quote protein strategy, and it's important to consider that the protein not only for feed, but indeed also for food for human beings. And then you spoke about public procurement. There is also the directive of public procurement. We spoke also. So there are things going on the European level, or the Biotech Act, and then I did not mention the elephant in the room, but it's the CAP, so the Common Agriculture Policy. But I must say honestly, right now, well, we are going to work on it, but there is really not enough consideration regarding environmental aspect, because it's now a lot and animal welfare left to the member states. So I think it's really something we need to work on as a parliament to make there some change regarding the common agricultural policy in order to push really for more plant-based nutrition, which is for the moment not really foreseen there, unfortunately.
Irina, and then...
Yes. I just wanted to also just come in quickly on this point, like how can consumers eat more plant-based proteins? And there's various issues, like there's various points where we can make changes. So this could be to change food-based dietary guidelines that member states publish, to incorporate also environmental aspects, and to have specific guidelines maybe for vegetarian, for vegan diets, and to incorporate all of the science, all of the knowledge that is there into the guidelines. And this could also mean that, for example, in terms of public procurement, that we would have public procurement that is aligned with these food-based dietary guidelines that are honestly quite far from the way we do consume food in Europe. So we're quite far from these recommendations. Also, there's a lot that retailers and in general the middle of the chain can do. So there's already a lot of retailers out there that have protein target splits. So they have committed to sell 50% animal, 50% plant-based protein, for example, or even higher plant-based proteins. They have, some of them, strategies to couple the price of plant-based products to the animal-based ones. So that means that your plant-based product will always be the same price or cheaper than the animal-based one. So that incentivizes consumers to choose these products. Also, there could be reformulation. So you could replace some of the meat in, for example, ready meals. You could easily replace the meat part. You could cut it down to a lower percentage and replace it with legumes, for example, that, as I mentioned, we don't eat enough of. So there's a lot of ways to do this at different levels. And I wanted to make one quick point on what was mentioned by EFSA on the precautionary principle and innovation in general. This is something that, so from a consumer perspective, this is very important to consumers. So food safety at EU level is really high, and consumers have very high expectation that this remains the same way. So in that regard, we don't see that innovation is an obstacle to this, but it's a safety net for consumers to know that the products that they buy are safe to consume. And we think that it pushes industry to innovate and research in a green and more sustainable way. So while we think that EFSA needs to be adequately resourced in order to go through the applications, we have concerns when it comes to changing the approval process that could undermine the safety and the transparency, a danger of mistrust in this from a consumer perspective. So I just wanted to highlight that it's ultimately also consumers who make the decisions of products failing or succeeding. So this is something that is very important, that they can trust the process.
Thank you. Let's Carlos was first, and you can comment on that.
Just to address two small issues, one from Tilly had mentioned before in the report, but very briefly, I think we are fully aligned as well here with BEUC. I mean, I think we all agree that, and we see this in all the Eurobarometers, the European consumer is not willing to open hand from the trust that has been put in safety, and we should not risk that. It takes 20 years to build, 20 days to destroy. That said, I mean, it's also an evolving system, and that's what I'm challenging a little, is we are now perhaps in a different reality where we could perhaps, again, talk and discuss how can we, keeping the transparency, which is our key principle, together with independence, I should add, but with all the new tools we have available, be able to perhaps avoid some situations like, as I mentioned, receiving dossiers, which could, with a little more of support, have been in a much better quality, probably giving a much quicker answer to the consumer as well. But alas, there are still some red lines that we need to make sure are not crossed, so we don't destroy in 20 days what we built for 20 years. That said, two items. One that was on your report, just to highlight that it's interesting, it's future-looking, but to flag you, it's extremely difficult. Something when you mention about also bringing the environmental aspect of some of these productions into the risk assessment or into the regulatory aspect. As you know, right now we have a very clear division between roles, between those providing scientific advice, is it safe or not, and then a political and managerial decision, do we approve it or not? Just to remember, sometimes EFSA has approved this, EFSA doesn't approve anything. We puff suggestions for the Parliament and the Member States and the Commission to decide. Environment could be, of course, the economic impacts, social, political impacts, that's out of the scope. But even just on the scientific side of how this production can impact the environment, affect biodiversity, just to highlight that while it is indeed the holistic future view that at least I personally am a One Health person advocate, it's easier said than done. And Tilly knows, I mean, we are trying to do this also in pesticides, where we have, after many decades, realized that we can't just find out if it's safe or not for the humans. We need to see what it does to the environment. Extremely different and complex, scientifically and methodologically, a nightmare, not in a bad way, but difficult. And just to highlight that this will need commitment, investment, brain power, and, again, might be slower. And my second element, you were talking about the cost of some of these productions which are hidden. This is something that not many people like to talk about, scientists and politicians, which is indeed the true cost of food. And the fact is that I would not just add, you mentioned the millions to clean the water. We may also have the thousands of euros in the health system after puffing yourself with certain types of diets. And how we address this in a sustainable way, and how do we show this? Who pays this bill? No one, hopefully. So we hid it away. But at some point, perhaps that will also need a more serious approach. Whether there is consensus, politically or societal, we seemed better a few years than we are perhaps now. But that's just my perspective, that we may be a little more far away from that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Giuseppina, you wanted to make a comment?
Comment because, of course, as I said, we need to educate. We started with the summer interesting project where I really addressed the school, so the students, and there it's not only in each member states, but also we went through the regions, just a very to help also the student to understand that, because you say we have to move from this diet of in terms of percentage, 60%, 40%, we are going to increase this percentage for more a diet that is more with the plant-based proteins. So this was a very nice initiative. And also something that maybe is missing from the research point of view, because of course the report, as you say, that doesn't really look at the healthy diet as such. You look only on specific product, but indeed what we miss is that a lot of it has been done in the past on a healthy diet for obesity, for diabetes, for cardiovascular diseases, but maybe less a little bit how really also a healthy diet can have an impact on some mental health disorder. And this is something that also may help to have this switch to a different diet.
Okay. So I open it to the floor. Are there questions that people want to raise? Anyone? There, one there. And
thank you very much. My name is Matthijs. I work for Compassion in World Farming. And I was wondering, the Commission is going to work on a protein plan soon. And it will focus on feed a lot, but also on food, we heard. So that's something we think is very positive. But in your perception, based on this discussion and the report, what are the most important things the EU Commission should now focus on? What regulations do we need? What investments? What actions? What are really the most important things to focus on right now? It's a question to everybody in the panel.
okay, well, who would like to start off? Okay.
I can start, but of course I'm only one part, one services of the Commission, and there are also colleagues here from other Commission services. So we definitely, biotechnology has been, last year we have this communication where I already addressed several challenges in all the sector and also the agri-food sector. So definitely we have to work on that. The challenges are different from the research point of view, but also the scaling up production. Because today we need also to look at that research needs to fill in certain gaps, maybe some health endpoints, some testing, some methodology, but also the scaling up production is very important. So we need also in the future to think to have a more pilot plants where we help the companies really to test and to start their production. We think that also in the future is something that we need to look is the regulatory sandboxes, which really allowed also a sort of a pre-testing. So instead of having a dossier that goes for authorization of product directly to the European market, we need also to support the companies to do this kind of pre-testing regulatory approach. It's already in the medicine legislation, so we would like also to have in the part of the food innovation. And so that's it, at least from general perspective.
Anyone else who would like to comment? Anders and then Tilly
Yeah,
first. and then
just to react, I think we should stick and be proud of our European model, where the precautionary principle indeed is key, and also leaving no one behind, affordability, etc. So we should definitely. I mean, we are always often is United States taken as an example regarding innovation. But I don't care about innovation if it's only for a few, or if it's just somewhere but the big majority of the population cannot in a safe way profit from it. Or as you said, people dying from something and then suddenly there comes a reaction. But just to react, for me, we have to be very careful with this sandbox tools. Of course, we want to have shorter ways, less administrative burden, but we should stick to our European model, where safety and consumer rights are key. What should we do first? That was the question on what should we prioritize. And I think Christine, who is sitting in front of you, Christine Leiner, she said it. I mean, we have the plant-based solutions that are there. We know that they have lower impact on the environment, that they are better for health, that they are better for the animals. So what are we waiting for? So I know there's a lot of agro lobbying of the big industry and etc. But sometimes I'm really thinking, when are we going to be coherent in politics and brave? And that's what we need. We need coherence. If we really want to achieve our climate goals, if we really want to save and restore biodiversity, if we really want to have more animal welfare, better health, yes, we didn't speak about the cost of health so far. So if we really consider all the externalities on health, on the environment, yes, I spoke about water. I could also speak about the air, about the soils, of course, we spoke about CO2 emission. If you consider all that, and we know a lot right now, there is one solution that we have right there. We should switch to more plant-based nutrition, and there we have all the information that we need to have. But, and then comes again the but, you need brave politicians, and people need to vote for those politicians who are also clear in their words and not. And then I think, well, it's a little bit populistic, but I stick to it. If you would show clearly to the people and from child on what really is the cost of, and I speak also of the animal suffering, of course, of the meat production. I mean, we would have much more vegetarian and vegan in society. I mean, it's not a shock therapy that I want for children, of course not. But we need, and that's something I'm always advocating, we need in schools and education, we need to inform the people better, where does that, what I eat, come from, and how was it really produced. We need more political education, but we need also more education, again, more connection to the food and where does it really come from and how it is produced. If we would really do that, I can tell you we would have much more vegetarian and vegan in here.
Hey, wait a second, let's have Anders first. After all, Anders is representing a livestock producing country, so he should have a right to answer.
Not only. Also, first country in the world who has an action plan for plant-based foods.
Okay.
As far as we know. Yeah, well, the content of EU's strategy on the proteins, starting in one end, we should look at a novel foods regulation, but not necessarily change it. But if we could help it, maybe also in member states could help the applicants to make better applications. It could be a way, but maybe also a European Commission could help in this sense. Regulatory sandboxes, yes, that's we are very much in favor of. We are very much in favor of the Danish government to press for these new genomic techniques. And in the other end, as I mentioned before, also look into the good old existing proteins, like I said in Denmark about the peas. And finally, one thing that I think that is important, if possible, make a good stakeholder process, because that's what we also did, and I forgot to mention, I also only mentioned the agreement from 2021 in the Danish Parliament, but we also have a huge work in 2024, where we had the nature conservation people, the farmers associations, the trade unions, the municipalities sitting around the same table with 5 ministers from 5 different ministries, sorting out a new agreement. It was also containing this about the plant-based food and the protein strategy, but also other things, of course, about what should we use the Danish landscape for. I think that's cross-sectoral and including process that is very important when you are developing a EU protein strategy.
Thank you, Anders. So, Carlos.
Yeah, also trying to address a little the question of where to go and what to do. And here is the point, I make the disclaimer, I'm neither a politician nor the Commission. So, but I am, of course, a citizen as well and a scientist. And perhaps I will focus on something different, which I think we continue to have to focus. I return to education and information. This will always be a disruptive topic. It's hot-headed politically, economically, socially. It remains extremely important as we progress with them. And I agree, Tilly, that plant-based are already on the much longer away the pathway. But it shouldn't make it impossible for us to be able to prioritize different things at different stages of development. So there is space indeed for implement these ones, as there should be to improve the other ones. And someone asked about why are we doing still sell meat with so high energy levels. Well, perhaps that can also be optimized. Some production systems have improved over the years. So we should have space for those, but again, without proper education and information, whether it is from the applicants, from the industry, from the consumers, from the politicians, and sometimes we also see those who are supposed to take these decisions with very little information to take these decisions. And on a topic which is already passion-driven, this can be a slippery slope. And I say this because I think the other thing that we need to continue to defend, again, I mentioned, and here it's an amen to what you said, Tilly, is our trust in the system we have. I used to say we have the strongest food safety system in the world. Now it's perhaps, one should say I have a big, beautiful system. But we should not easily give this away, because this is something that has taken Europe 25 years to build, more or less. I mean, that's the lifetime of EFSA. People might forget, but the European Food Safety Authority is born out of a scandal, or a collection of scandals. Scandal is perhaps a strong word, but challenges in exactly how we handle food safety and how we take decisions. And we spent 25 years with the member states, with the consumers, organizations, with the industry to build this system. Let's be very careful to shake that building, because it can be something to regret. So education and information on top of whatever has already been said.
Thank you. There's one, I have time for one more question over there.
Thank you very much for these very interesting discussions that we've been having today. We've covered many perspectives, and it truly is a whole, a complex issue to deal with that needs to be tackled from many angles. One thing we didn't talk about was trade policy and commodity trading. I give an example. Canada is the second producer in the world of lentils. I'm Canadian. We don't really eat lentils. Those lentils end up somewhere else. So if we were to change to a plant-based diet tomorrow, would we have the necessary ingredients to do so? And is trade policy something that needs to be looked at? Is it something that can help us shift, or rather keep us from shifting to more plant-based diets?
Thank you. Anders, do you want to take your WTO role on?
I would say I think trade is a good thing. Maybe we should not import lentils all the way from Canada. I don't know, but it comes also down to what Carlos is talking about is these food safety measures. In the WTO, we have the sanitary and phytosanitary rules, and they are also under pressure. And when I go to the SPS committee in the WTO, EU is under pressure from maybe also from Canada to have too low residue levels for pesticides for the MRLs. So trade is kind of a barrier. What I hear from Carlos is that we should have the barrier. We don't think it's high. No, it's low because the pesticides levels are low. No, but that is one thing that we struggle with, and maybe it's not even easier. And I am a civil servant, so I should be careful. But of course, there are some discussions also with the agreement that the EU and US did on trade lately. How should that be spelled out also on what we call SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary measures? What should be written down about that? I know that's not a clear answer, but of course, on the other hand, we should also be better in Europe to grow lentils, to grow other things, and we are practicing.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead.
Karin, and I need to challenge it like a scientist. I think first, no, we are not self-sustainable in several of these areas. And then you could say, well, that's because we use a lot of it to feed the cows. So if you have less cows, more lentils available for us. But then there is also another reality. If we would like to really increase, and this is of course open out to a lot of discussion, not today, if we really want to increase production of more vegetables, then we could say, well, we also don't want to destroy more forests. We have the square kilometers we have. How do you extract more out of the soil, which is under pressure, is erosion, and so on. And here we get with this little of give and take. Well, we want to have better production, but we don't want GMOs or NGTs. Well, we want more space, but we cannot want to sacrifice more of the wetlands. So this trade-off in many of these, I think, solutions will force a scientific discussion first. Happy to join, and then a political one. Good luck.
Okay, with that we are exactly on time at 2:30. It rests me just to thank a number of people. First of all, the Belgian Academy for making the place available and for helping us so well with these type of launches that EASAC is doing. I'll have to ask and thank, of course, Team EASAC with Sabina and Tanya and Georg here, and also Andrea in the office. And then, of course, the technical team there, Peter and Jonathan, who made it all possible today, which is useful. I would like to thank, and again, we mentioned COFRA as a charity in the Netherlands who supported this type of project. And of course, at the end of the day, I want to thank you all for your participation and for coming here today. So thank you very much. There is some coffee afterwards for further networking if you have the time for that.